One afternoon, a man named Daniel was walking through a small old market near his town. He loved looking at old books, watches, cameras, and other forgotten things. Suddenly, he noticed an old camera sitting on a small wooden table. The camera looked very old, but it was still in good condition. Daniel asked the seller how much he wanted for it. The seller smiled and said, "You can have it for $10." Daniel thought it was a good price, so he bought the camera and took it home. That evening, he cleaned the camera carefully and opened the old film compartment. To his surprise, there was still a roll of film inside. Daniel had no idea how old the film was, but he decided to develop it. The next morning, Daniel took the film to a small photography shop. The shop owner told him that the film looked very old and might not work. Daniel waited patiently while the photographer developed the pictures. A few hours later, he received a small envelope containing several photographs. Daniel opened the envelope and looked at the first picture. It showed an old house surrounded by trees. The second picture showed a family standing in front of the same house. Daniel looked carefully at the people in the photograph. Suddenly, his heart began to beat faster. The family looked strangely familiar to him. There was a young woman, a little boy, and an older man standing beside them. Daniel looked at the photograph again and noticed something unbelievable. The young woman looked exactly like his mother when she was young. Daniel immediately called his mother and asked her to come to his house. When his mother arrived, Daniel showed her the photograph. She became completely silent and stared at it for several seconds. Then she touched the photograph with shaking hands. "Where did you get this?" she asked. Daniel explained everything about the old camera. His mother looked worried and said, "I have never seen this picture before." Daniel pointed at the little boy in the photograph. "Mom, who is this?" His mother looked at the boy and began to cry. She finally told Daniel something she had kept secret for more than 30 years. The little boy in the picture was Daniel's older brother. Daniel was shocked because he had never known that he had a brother. His mother explained that she had a son before Daniel was born. His name was Michael, and he had disappeared when he was only 5 years old. One summer afternoon, Michael was playing near their old house when he suddenly disappeared. The family searched everywhere, but they could never find him. After many years, they stopped believing that they would ever see him again. Daniel could not believe what he was hearing. He looked at the photograph again and noticed something behind his mother. There was a small wooden box near the house. Daniel remembered seeing the same box in some old family belongings. He asked his mother about it, but she said she had not seen it since they left that house. The next day, Daniel decided to visit the old house. His mother did not want him to go, but Daniel needed answers. After several hours of driving, he finally found the house. It looked exactly like the house in the photograph, although it was much older now. Daniel stood outside for a moment and wondered what secrets were still hidden inside. He slowly opened the front door and walked inside. The house was dusty and completely empty. Daniel walked through the rooms and recognized some things from the old photographs. Then he reached the backyard and saw the old wooden box. His heart started beating faster. Daniel opened the box and found several old letters inside. Most of them were written by his mother and father many years ago, but one letter was different. It was written by a man Daniel had never heard of. The letter said, "I know where your son is." Daniel continued reading, with shaking hands. The letter explained that Michael had been found near a train station after getting lost. A man had taken him to a nearby town because the boy could not remember where he lived. The man tried to find his family, but he never succeeded. Eventually, Michael was taken to an orphanage. Daniel could hardly breathe. He immediately called his mother and told her what he had found. His mother started crying on the phone. She had spent 30 years believing that her son was dead. Now, for the first time, they had a possible clue that he might still be alive. Daniel searched the internet for the name of the orphanage mentioned in the letter. After hours of searching, he finally found an old record. The record contained the name Michael Carter. Daniel stared at the screen in disbelief. There was also a note saying that Michael had been adopted by a family in another city. Daniel spent the next few days searching for more information. Finally, he found a man with the same name living in a small town several hours away. He did not know if it was really his brother. He decided to call the number listed online. An older man answered the phone. Daniel was nervous and did not know what to say. Finally, he asked, "Were you adopted when you were a child?" There was a long silence on the other side. The man then quietly answered, "Yes." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He knew he had finally found the person he had been searching for. A few days later, Daniel and his mother traveled to the man's town. When they arrived, an older man opened the door. Daniel looked at him and immediately noticed something familiar in his face. The man looked at Daniel for several seconds. Then he looked at their mother. Nobody spoke for a moment. Their mother began to cry and said, "Michael." The man covered his mouth with his hand. He could not believe what he was hearing. After 30 years, he was finally standing in front of his mother again. Michael remembered very little about his childhood, but he remembered one thing clearly. He remembered a woman holding his hand near the old house. He remembered her telling him, "I will always find you." He had spent his whole life wondering who that woman was. The family spent the entire day together. They talked about the past, looked at old photographs, and shared memories. Daniel showed Michael the old camera that had brought them together. Michael smiled when he saw it. He said, "Maybe that camera was waiting for us all these years." Before leaving, Daniel gave Michael the photograph from 30 years ago. Michael looked at the picture and smiled. Through his tears, "I thought I would never see this family again," he said. Their mother held both of her sons in her arms. For the first time in 30 years, the family was together again. That night, Daniel returned home and placed the old camera on his desk. He looked at it differently now. It was no longer just an old camera from a market. It had become the reason his family had found each other again. Daniel realized that sometimes the smallest things can change an entire life. The photograph had been taken 30 years ago, but its story was not finished. It had waited quietly inside an old camera until the right person found it. Daniel smiled as he looked at the photograph one last time. He finally understood that some memories never truly disappear. Sometimes they simply wait for the right moment to come back. And that old photograph became the most important photograph in Daniel's life. It reminded him that family can be separated by time, distance, and even years of silence. But love can survive all of them. 30 years after the picture was taken, the people in it were finally together again. And this time, nobody was going to disappear.